problems with Bambu Lab filament that's not what you think it is, Hulk smash, especially when it's Nextruder nozzles, and bottom supports on a P1S not looking great. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 145. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, welcome back to PrintFix Friday, the longest running series where we help you get your printers back to printing with purpose. If you are going through some issues with your 3D printers, remember you can reach out to us on all the social medias linked on screen and in the description, so don't hesitate to slide into those DMs, especially on Twitter. That's the one that I monitor the most. So, you know, if you're on Twitter or X or whatever the heck new name it is, hit us up there. It's a great place to get some help. We're going to start off with one that has actually garnered a fair bit of attention. This is a Bambu Lab filament spool that titled Absolutely Unacceptable Quality for Filament. Let's read what's going on. Dear Bambu team, I understand that there are issues with scaling to some huge volumes. I understand that you designed the refill spools to be more environmentally friendly option than getting the whole spool again. What I have to say is that the issues with the quality are absolutely unacceptable, and you need to take immediate, decisive action to correct them. Okay. Demanding? But alright. They've never listened to me. In fact, they've called me a liar quite a few times, so I wish you the best. We're just going to keep reading on. Today, I received an order of 2 refill spools of PLA Basic Silver. Both rules are in absolutely unusable condition. See pictures. I wish I could say this is the first time that this issue has occurred. However, previously, I have purchased refill rolls for PLA Matte Dark Blue and encountered a similar situation. They shrunk the cardboard insert by a few millimeters, causing the filament to gradually drift to the side of the spool, preventing the AMS from feeding it. I also wish I could say that I am the only person on the subreddit to encounter this issue. However, I have noticed a few posts and many comments that have encountered similar issues. This is absolutely unacceptable that you are shipping rolls in this condition, and I hope to see immediate change on the matter. So we've got a refill spool here that the person had to re-spool themselves. Does anyone else notice the problem here? Like, look, all right, I am more than happy to call out bad behavior of companies when it makes sense. I'm more than happy to hold companies accountable when it makes sense. And in fact, there's been many times that we've called out Bambu for being a bad actor. In fact, we'll card to one of my favorite ones where we decrypted their log file on the X1 Carbon and proved that, yes, these machines are collecting way more data than is reasonably necessary. But looking at this, I know how these respools end up coming, or at least I have experience with refill spools in the past. It's normally, think of a roll of filament without the sides on it, and everything's kind of held together with zip ties. If your spool, if your cardboard, or the thing in between the sides is a little bit too long, the spool can now expand. And that allows the winds to kind of go all over the place, which is exactly what happened here. This one is just improper user experience. And I can understand the frustration here, right? At this point, yeah, it's done. The only thing you can do is re-spool it or toss it. But if you're buying refill spools to be more environmentally friendly, I feel like you've only made one option, which is to re-spool, because throwing it away negates the entire reason of getting this in the first place. I'm a huge proponent of cardboard spools because they're really easy to recycle, and in fact, if it wasn't for the glue, they are 100% recyclable, which is super awesome. And the plastic spools are fine, and they're great come the holiday season when everyone has extension cords and lights they need to spool up. That's how we get rid of our spools, by the way. We keep them in trash bags throughout the year, all the empty plastic spools, and then come the holiday season, we just put a post up on Facebook Marketplace and say, free spools for your extension cords and holiday lights. Come and get them. They're at my mailbox. And traditionally, they're gone within a couple of days. So if you have a bunch of plastic spools laying around, there's that. And I guess the other option is if you could categorize the plastic spools, you could grind them up and turn them into filament. But a lot of these plastic spools are ABS, PC-ABS, PC, or some blend thereof. So they're not always the best to be turned into filament. If any of you have worked with PC-ABS, it's the temperature resiliency of polycarbonate with the easy flow of ABS, but also the worst of both of them, which is crazy amounts of warping. So there's that. But unfortunately, in this case, this one is gonna scream user error for me. I'm sorry, dude. Like, I know you're upset, and I can feel that frustration. I felt that frustration of, crap. But before you cut the zip ties or whatever it is that Bambu is using off of those refill spools, you want to make sure that you don't have any extra space. If you have extra space between the windings and the side of the spool, it's going to fill that space. When it does that, those windings stop being very tight. When the windings aren't tight, you can get it to fall in exactly the way that we see it here. This is not Bambu's fault, and I have to agree with the top comment. I think it would have been a lot more impactful if you had decided to put these rolls onto a spool. Like, why did you open it and install it if this is the way that they looked? And I don't think that this is how they looked. So what they're saying is, my apologies. I should correct, it looked fine, just a little loose, and that can be expected for refill rolls. Them to be a little bit loose, that's expected. Then I put it on the roll, loaded into the AMS, and it immediately tunneled through the spool and errored out. For the other one, I was curious if it was the same problem, so I grabbed it out, put it on a roll, and pulled on the end. Same exact problem. The spool immediately gave way, and the filament strand tunneled through the roll. That is just because you don't have a tight winding, and if there is any excess gap here, the filament will find a way. Unfortunately, the best option, in my opinion, here is to respool. Thankfully, there are tons of respooling options available, and it all is sparked by Bambu because their AMS, while it is a nice kind of a package deal, it is not compatible with like 30% of the spools on the market that we've tried, and they're distinctly not compatible with our favorite brand, Printed Solid, so there's that problem too. So I get the reason that you might want to respool. For me, I don't bother with it. I just feed it through the AMS and then just put the filament on one of like the hangers that you see behind me. Yes, it means it fails to unload the filament, but at that point the print's done and I don't care anyways. Clear the error, stop the print, life is good. I would be curious, those of you that do buy the refill rolls from Bambu, if there is a big gap there, and if there is, have you experienced this? And if there isn't a big gap, how have you made sure that there wasn't one? And more specifically, if there was a big gap, did you just cut down the cardboard part of the spool? Because that's what I would have done. I don't know, man. I got so many freaking cables laying around. It's not that difficult to find a use for old filament spools. And in fact, I know that Printables has ran contests on using old spools to create stuff. Whether you're turning them into vertically stacked horizontal little bins that fit into a spool. We've seen other ones like holding dice and that kind of stuff. So there are ways to repurpose the spools that aren't just throw it away or get refill spools. There are other options. I'm making this post to warn others not to make the same mistake that I did. Just a warning to everyone who runs a Mark IV and a Prusa XL, do not over tighten the screw that holds the nozzle heater block. Even if it is just barely over tightened, it'll crimp the thin metal tube above the copper and will cause the extruder to click and extrude poorly. After about a month, I found out this was the issue and couldn't find a fix anywhere. So I hope this helps somebody else. So we've actually seen this before. It was a few weeks ago, but Joel Telling had the same problem. He put the full Joel on one of those nozzles and crimped that bad boy flat. Even Prusa recommends that you don't over tighten them. And there's a whole way on how to do it here in the instruction manual. I pulled the one for the XL just because it is easier. And we can see that they have multiple warnings, like for the nozzle. The specified torque value is 1.5 Newton meters. Really, really tiny. But for the actual screws themselves, you want to maintain the position and using the TX8 Torx key to carefully tighten the grub screw to secure the hot end. Do not use extra force while tightening. It may damage the hot end tube. Like, I get it. It's in the instructions and it's hard sometimes to know that before you do the thing. But heat breaks are thin metal and thin metal bends. So I'm not too surprised that this happened. I know this is not an uncommon problem and I've seen it happen multiple times to multiple users. So if this does happen to you, just know you've learned a somewhat expensive lesson. Now, theoretically, you could fix this, but I don't think you should try. You could basically put a specified reamer into it that is tapered, that would reform the metal. That's probably not worth your time. These nozzles are relatively cheap, at least as far as the nozzle goes. This one specifically, I think, is actually an adapter, just kind of the way that it looks in the person's hand. I don't see the rest of the nozzle, so I'm assuming it's one of the nozzle adapters, so that you can run a standard V6 nozzle. It's a bummer. I don't like it either, but it is one of those cases of you just gotta be careful. It's similar to the thermistors, right? Those thermistors are stupid delicate, and you want to just barely tighten them, because if you really rip into it, you're going to basically squish the thermistor. It's not going to work as well, and often they can just simply straight up fail. We don't want to see that happen, so when in doubt, RTFM. Not saying that I'm a good example of that, but do as I say and not as I do. Someone get Don Ho, because we've got tiny bubbles. Tiny bubbles. We got PETG. They think it's wet filament, but judge by yourself. Well, I'm going to judge in front of an audience of people, and you can't stop me. Yeah, it's wet filament. This is indicative of slightly damp PETG, and I know, but Grant, you say it's not wet filament. I know I do, but sometimes it is. It's not wet filament right up until the point that it is. This is completely indicative of wet filament to me. We've got very, very small wisps. We've got little tiny dots here, similar to Rice Krispie treats. And while it is not the most damp that I've ever seen filament, it is definitely moist. You're welcome, editor. The best thing you could do here is just dry out the filament. Filament dryers are great, and we will be doing a showdown of dryers coming soon. So if you do want to see that, let me know your favorite filament dryers down below. I'm not going the DIY route for this because there's way too many factors involved in that. But it's very damp here in Florida, and we might have some filament that's been submerged in water for over a year. But I also have some spools that we've put outside in our garage where it's actually been raining for like the past 3 or 4 days. So we want to test out filament dryers, see not only how well that they work, but if we need to make modifications, what modifications do we need to make and why to make them more effective. So in this case, it is to dry the filament. Be careful with PETG. You don't want to get it too hot. Anything above like 65°C is going to be pushing it. It's not going to melt, but it's going to get soft. And that softness can sometimes adjust the filament to have way more ovality than you would expect. Bulging corners. Yeah, I mean, some people like a good bulge, but it's not my thing, you know? You do you. I'm trying to fix the issue on my Ender 3 Pro, but I tried to increase the speed and acceleration, and the problem persists. Currently, in the pictures, is my last try at 100 millimeters per second for infill and walls, and acceleration at 2500 millimeters per second. It should be squared there. To infill and walls as well. The problem did not improve or worsen with the changes, and I'm not sure what to try. Let's take a look. It's in a book, The Reading Rainbow. So yeah, we definitely have some corner bulging here. You know, interesting. We have a heavily modded Ender 3 Pro. It's got a linear rail. It's got a Micro Swiss NG, I believe. So we've made a lot of modifications. We have a BL Touch. We've made a bunch of modifications here. And when you make mods, things become a problem. Why is your Bowden tube in 2 pieces? Don't do that. Don't do that. But yeah, this to me is indicative of pressure advance or linear advance. We've talked about this in the past, and we can see that the user's not actually running Clipper, which would be traditionally what we would see here, that they're running Clipper, they haven't tuned their PA values yet, and I'm not exactly certain how to tune pressure advance on stock printers. You can obviously add it to your start code if you needed to, but you'll need to know what type of firmware your machine is running. If you don't know, by and large, it's probably Marlin, so just be careful there. In Marlin, it's called linear advance, and linear advance, really simple way of describing it, it just stops extrusion before it hits a corner, right? Pressure advance does a similar thing, and it's a coast feature, more or less. If you turn it up a lot, it can actually retract filament, which is never the right thing to do in my experience. Even on printers that have like 1+ meter long Bowden tubes. Yes, the Fusion 3, that's right up there, has a 1 meter long Bowden tube. And when we've been tuning pressure advance, It's been a little tough on it. But that one runs rep wrap firmer, so it's further on the bit of an interesting style printer. I think linear advance is going to be the best move here. It is a relatively easy thing to do, and in fact, Orca Slicer has an entire tuning thing built into it. And so we can see here in Orca, all you gotta do is go to calibration, pressure advance, and then set your settings. This is normally just fine. Just leave it this way. You got to choose if you're a direct drive extruder or a Bowden. You can do a PA tower, PA liner, PA pattern, and then just click OK. And then there you go. So it's going to slowly set it. If we go to slice, we'll be able to see that it is just going to adjust the pressure advance. Me personally, I prefer the PA pattern. I think it's the best one. We slice the plate, we can see it. It's very obvious to tell in my experience, and you just got to set your values for what you're looking for your pressure advance. From there, just read it. What looks the best? Whatever that is, put that in your start code, because that will set it appropriately in the start code without having to do anything inside of the code of the machine. It's a little bit jank because you have to make sure it's on all of your profiles, or some of them will be nice and some of them won't, but it beats having to recompile Marlin, so there's that. P1S support ruins one side of my prints. Is a solution to print upright and let it support the inside instead. First design and print of my new machine. Sorry if it's a dumb question. No, it's not a dumb question. This is just typical. So what we're dealing with is the underside of supports that don't look great. And quite frankly, the top side even has some issues as well. It looks like it's under extruding, but I'm not going to worry about that one right now. Right? It's a P1S that can sometimes be a little bit finicky. Just make sure your extruder is tight. Make sure there's not a bunch of resistance in the Bowden tube. And try something other than white filament, please. White filament sucks. There are a couple of ways to deal with this. Yes, printing it upright would mean that you only have support there. And you might want to put a little bit here on the underside of the hoop. But it also means that the part will be incredibly weak. The way that you printed it is the best way to print it without cutting it into pieces. If you wanted it to be as strong as humanly possible without dealing with support, you would cut it along the central axis and just open it up. Print it flat on that cut surface, and they don't need to bond it together. Us personally, we love ourselves some of the good sticky, the 3D gloop. It's good stuff. It is a chemical welding agent, so the gloop is actually stronger than the printed parts, and gloop is really strong. In fact, it held an entire Florida man and then some. And we'll card to that entire interview if you want to see more than just Florida man almost hurt himself trying to fight a robot. Because yes, that actually happened. I live in a fever dream, I think. But this is indicative of just what you can expect with supports. And in fact, I actually think this looks pretty darn good. Right? Especially if this is your first print. I'm pretty impressed. That looks good. I'm happy. I know that it's not the perfect print that you're looking for, but we have to remember what we're dealing with. These are computer-controlled hot glue guns, and at some point, they're going to be limited by what they're capable of doing just because of how the system works. If you're pooping out plastic in a really, really, really small nozzle, I mean, 0.4 millimeters is so tiny, I can't easily show it to you on calipers because I have to get to a point where you can see the light shining through it. The fact that it looks this good with no tuning, this is your first print apparently, is nothing short of amazing. This is what the industry has come to, and I think that is awesome. The fact that you can buy a 3D printer off the shelf, plug it in, and print something that you have designed, and it looks that good is awesome. And if you think that's awesome as well, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed, because that doesn't cost you a dime, but it helps the channel grow, and we would greatly appreciate that here. Is this a big deal? Well, if you're this person, it might be. You can look at changing your amount of interface gap that you have in your parts. We don't use Bambu Studio because it collects and sends unnecessary data that you cannot opt out of because reasons, apparently. But when we're looking at support, and so this is going to be very similar to what Bambu Studio is going to look like, and if you're still using Bambu Studio, use Orca Slicer and put it into stealth mode. You're welcome. So it's this here, the top Z distance and the bottom Z distance. You can reduce this number. This number can go down, and at least on a Bambu, top Z is 0.25. You can go down to 0.2, you can go down to 0.15. Just be careful. The closer that gap is, the higher the likelihood that your parts just fuse together. And that's not fun. That's like the exact opposite of what you have here. So you can spend time tuning it. You can look at getting the Panda Jet from Big Tree Tech if you want better cooling. But I think we might be able to tune that top Z distance just a little bit to make it look nicer. Also, part of this is just setting expectation. I'd love to know what you all think, because me personally, I dealt with like the underside of parts looking like absolute dog water for years, and we just had to accept it because technology was where it was at. We're at points where like sub $1,000 3D printers, hell, sub $500 3D printers can get beautiful bottom surfaces even with support material. And I recognize that it's not injection molding quality, but neither is the rest of the part. So am I wrong to say this is more of a expectation setting problem than it is an actual settings problem? I'd love to know your thoughts down below. The same way that I love to know the thoughts of all of our channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Thank you for what you all do in making these videos possible. Remember, if you want to support this channel for more than a like and subscribe, you know, hey, put a couple of bucks into that creator fund and help us out with some fun products, because behind me is going to be changing. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be a whole video as we look to better organize our shop. And I completely blame Bob at I Like to Make Stuff, because his whole video on organizing his shop and rebuilding it, I feel that pain. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll link to it, and I think I can actually put it below me. I don't know. We'll see. If not, the editor's going to cut this out anyways, and you won't see it. But I do love the way that he approaches that, because I feel the same way. I need space to put things, but I don't have the space because I'm working in a very, very small environment. For those that don't know, it is 6 feet from the edge of my desk to the edge of that shelf. It is not a very far distance. So a lot of things are going to be changing in here as we look to produce better content for you all more often. That's all I have for you all today. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And we are bringing on a sponsor if I haven't already announced it. And I'm really excited for this. And as always, keep making awesome. Episode 145. See you later.